What's up, Keep Pounding crew? We're back today with another video. Keep pounding. So, today's topic is the 2014 and 15 Panthers and why they set the bar for everything that we are trying to reach as a franchise. If you like the channel, if you like the video, if you like the streams, hit that like button, hit that follow button, hit that bell, select all, leave a comment down below if you feel like doing so. And don't forget to follow the Facebook page, Keep Pounding, in all capital letters, for in-game posts, polls, opinions, and reactions to NFL news, as well as schedule releases. So, let's dive on in. Alright, so the first video in this series, we're going to talk about 5 goals and 5 reasons why this team in 14 and 15 was so successful and set the bar. And the first section I want to talk about is the roster. This is the best roster we've ever had in franchise history in 2015 because you had depth in every single position from top to bottom. I mean, let's go through each position and talk about it a little bit and kind of explain why. Quarterback. Cam Newton's prime years of his career, he was an absolute hurricane and impossible to stop. It was impossible to game plan around because this is the first time when you really didn't see many RPO type quarterbacks in the league that could play like he could with that athleticism. And now you're starting to see a lot more of them, but at the time it was not really a growing trend. But he makes sure it became a trend at that time. So, you know, with the amount of rushing touchdowns that Cam got, plus his ability to extend plays and keep things going, I mean, he was an absolute force to be reckoned with. So, that was a major factor of why we went 15-1 going into the playoffs and got as far as we did. Derek Anderson was the only quarterback I didn't agree with being on the roster. However, he was touted as being the best free agent at the time. I feel like we got our money's worth out of it, but, you know, we'll see. We'll see, you know, how time will see that. Joe Webb. Watching him was like watching Cam 2.0, but slightly lesser in skills. You know, it was a thing of beauty watching him during camp, during the preseasons, throwing and running, you know, RPO types, same style. Not to mention his special teams play. You know, so Joe Webb was a very, very valuable asset, even at third string. And I was very, very impressed with what he could do and what his ceiling could be, you know, at the time. So, it's a shame it didn't work out that way, but great quarterback and a great man nonetheless. And I was very, very excited to have him on this roster, and I'm sure many of you enjoyed that as well. We move on to running back. We were loaded there. Jonathan Stewart led the way with excellent carrying and displays of strong 3 to 4 yard carries, keeping the drives going. I was very impressed with the strength and skills that he showed us during that time. It was a great time to be a Panthers fan while watching this running crew. If you like the running backs, Toldozer, you know, we had Cameron Artis-Payne at the time, and it was just so fun. Fozzie, on the roster as well, kept things going. And Toldozer, as I like to call him, was the main driving force when you had short yardage situations. And it was just beautiful to know that we could totally rely on Toldozer to get us those first downs in those situations. 9 out of 10 times. And it was almost automatic. So that was the bar for fullback, in my opinion. I haven't seen anybody that strong and that much of a bruiser at fullback in a long time. Did he struggle at blocking? A little bit, but, his main job was to get us those first downs, which Cam could as well. So they relied on each other, in a way. But Jonathan Stewart led that running backs room with strength and determination. His plays were what kept his offense running and kept drives alive when we got in trouble. So, people loved this running back crew. It was incredible to watch on the field, and it absolutely sold tickets. So, moving on to wide receiver and tight end. The crew didn't look like much on paper, but when they got on the field and made plays, it counted, and it was big. Players like Philly Brown, Cotchery, Funchess reminded us that you don't have to be big-name players on a roster to make a huge impact. Ted Ginn's speed was impressive, and it goes beyond that. It's their professionalism and determination that set the bar for decades for the wide receivers that we're still trying to reach. Moving on to Greg Olsen. And I already know who Greg Olsen was before we got him in that trade with the Bears. And I knew that we got an absolute steal when we got this man. He was an incredible human being, not to mention an incredible tight end, and probably one of the top 5 tight ends I've ever seen in my lifetime of watching NFL football. He's an incredible, determined player, motivated, and he just looked like he wanted to be there and gave 110% on every play. It was so fun knowing that you could rely on him and keep these drives alive. I've lost count of how many drives that this man has kept alive that shouldn't have been kept alive after that Super Bowl era. So, it was just amazing, and he absolutely deserves his spot on that Ring of Honor. Moving on to the O-line. With the exception of Mike Rimmers, who we're covering up all of his weaknesses on the line with all of our strength elsewhere, I thought we had an incredible line. We had incredible depth, and Mike Rimmers is a respectable guy, and I do hope that somebody does sign him, but, take that double-edged sword with you, though, because he's the one that cost the Super Bowl 50. However, I do believe he's a great guy. Speaking about the rest of the line, we had Trey Turner, Michael Oher, Norwell, Soatulu, and Darrell Williams. And, that was a solid 5. You could count on all 5 to get us there, along with our anchor of the offensive line, Ryan Coyle, who was a signal caller, and you always knew where you were supposed to be if you're an offensive lineman. You always knew what you were supposed to be doing, what gaps you were supposed to be filling, what you're supposed to do, on every play. I mean, Ryan Coyle made sure you knew that and didn't screw up. This was the best center I've ever seen. Not just in Carolina, but ever, in my opinion. I also liked Velasco as his backup. Many people don't know that he actually was with New England before he came here. So, solid guy, solid signal caller, and a great man. On and off the field. We didn't need him that year, but we knew if we needed to rely on him, he was ready. And if you consider the comparison of what our offensive line looks like now versus what the offensive line looked like back in 2015, we are starting to grow that offensive line yet again and get to that point. So, be patient, folks. We're getting there. We started the journey. Moving on to the D-line. With players like Mario and Jared Allen leading the way, we truly felt like we had one of the fiercest defensive lines in the league that year, if not the fiercest. I mean, these guys were nasty on that line. You did not want to play against that defense. It was so incredibly hard to game plan around them. And, you got players like Dorian Edwards, Charles Johnson, the Kraken, KK Short. You knew you had men up front. Not just players, but men up front to deal with. So, if you're an offensive lineman back in 2015, you knew you were in for a dogfight until that clock hits triple zeros. These guys were going to come hard, and they were going to hit you like a 10-ton truck. That's just what they did. So in that way, you got motivation, you got determination, you got strength, you got the motivation that you need to properly put the heat on the offensive lineman. And boy, did they ever. If you look at the stats for that defensive line, mercy. That's one of the most dangerous defensive lines I've ever seen. So, add in Starla Toure, and that D-line was causing all kinds of problems for offensive linemen and quarterbacks alone. You saw sacks, you saw tackles for loss, you saw run stopping, and stopped at the line run stopping. You don't see that anymore in Carolina. That's what they were able to successfully do back then. And they made a habit of it. It was consistent. And I'd like for us to get back to that point again. It would be really, really nice. But that is the bar that we're trying to set on D-line. Moving on to linebackers. You already know who I'm going to talk about. It's no big secret. Everybody knew who Luke and Thomas Davis were. You put those two together, you did not want to play against both of these veteran absolute champions. You did not want to play against them because you knew exactly what you were going to get. Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis go hard 110% every game until that clock hits triple zero, and they made you feel it when they tackled you. It was absolutely brutal. Not only that, if you consider the smarts that both of these guys put into this, the intelligence, they were a 1-2 duo that was impossible to match. absolutely impossible. So, with that in mind, Luke could figure out your plays before you even snap the ball. We're talking about a man that figured out 3/4 of Peyton Manning's audibles just in the first half of the Super Bowl. That's going to get overlooked. But think about that for just a moment. Pause the video and think about that for just a moment. Because if you know anything about Peyton Manning's audibles, man, what a chess match between these two. It was incredible to watch. And everybody's going to remember the second half of that Super Bowl, but focus on that first half if you want to see some real chess match brain moves between those two. Thomas Davis is a legend in and of himself. I mean, this dude has saved so many games, I've lost count during that time period. You got A.J. Klein running behind these two, and he was going to be an instant starter. You already knew this, and as soon as he left Carolina, he became an instant starter in New Orleans. But what a linebacker core. And you had Shaq back then as well, who is still with us now. But he's still showing what he learned today from these two. And it's absolutely remarkable. So, defensive backs. With Josh Norman leading the pack of exceptional corners, you knew that not much was going to get past him. You had they set the bar on execution, determination, and making the most out of every play and technique and footwork. Charles Tillman invented the peanut punch and is forever known in Panthers history as one of the best corners we have ever had. And if you combine that together with Trey Boston, Kurt, and the whole of Steve's Avenue back there, you did not want to face Steve's Avenue. You did not at 15. These guys were ridiculous. And Benny Benwickery also contributed a great deal as well during that time. So when you put all of that together, that is one of the nastiest secondaries I've ever seen in the league. And it continues to set the bar today as far as what we are trying to do as a franchise. Moving on to the kicker position. Graham Gano in his prime was amazing to watch. He reminded me of John Casey 2.0, much better and much improved. And he was able to make some of these long kicks that you would never even think were possible. The depth we had was ridiculous during that time. And I don't think we'll ever end up with that kind of depth again. But you can give Dave Gettleman the credit for it. You can give Ron Rivera the credit for it. And maybe even the owner, Jerry Richardson, the credit for it. But we had the most ragtag group of players you could think of, and it turned into a masterpiece of a roster. Some Panther fans are struggling to find out why it worked as well as it did. Well, to answer that in a single word, chemistry. Is it possible to get to that point again? Yes. We can and we will. Be patient, Panthers fans. The new dawn of Panthers history is coming. Will you be there to see it happen? Keep pounding.